Hey, soccer fans, welcome to Sons of a Pitch Soccer Central. I am your host, Nick, and we are talking everything MLS from this past week's worth of games. We had midweek games, we have weekend games, we got a lot to cover because, man, it was the wild Western Conference this weekend with a lot of results flipping things in the playoff table as well as a little bit of a shakeup at the top. I don't think we're as confident in Austin and LAFC as we used to be, but we're going to get all into all of that in just a minute. I want to take a moment to wish everyone a happy Labor Day. Definitely had my share of labors today. I know that's not the intended use of the holiday weekend, but was doing a lot of yard work and a lot of work around the house. So gotta also recognize my in-laws for babysitting the kids while I got all that done. So thanks to them. But hope you all enjoyed the long weekend, the holiday weekend, and are ready to talk some soccer and get back into it. As I mentioned, it was the wild Western Conference. We're going to break down all the results and headlines from this weekend. And then in the second half of the show, we continue with our team profiles. And we're going to look at Orlando City SC. We're going to take a look at how they ended up at fifth in the table despite being offensively challenged for large parts of the season. Also, they're getting ready for their US Open Cup championship game this week. And if we've got any stoppage time, we'll take some questions and address some chats from you, the viewers, live here on YouTube. But as we always do, let's kick it off with that great intro music. Soccer fans, this is your host, Nick, once again at Sons of a Pitch Soccer Central. We are recapping MLS. Gosh, is this week 29, I believe we're in, 28 and 29. The season is coming to a close, and it is going to be a wild finish, so make sure you stay tuned. Also, real quick, MLS Soccer put out, MLSsoccer.com put out the playoff schedule. So make sure you go check that out and make sure that your weekends in October are clear. As I put on Twitter, spend time with the family now because your October weekends are booked. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into our recaps. I want to remind you all, if you like what we're doing here at SOP Soccer with the weekly MLS recaps, with our weekly betting picks and predictions videos that come out Wednesday night, with our Twitter conversations and comments, as well as doing some live stream watch-alongs and reactions with some of the Toronto games on a monthly basis or so. If you want to continue to support us, please leave a super chat, leave a super thanks here on YouTube. But also, if you are looking to sponsor the show and want to contribute in a bigger way, we're developing a new website. And if you want to be our prime website sponsor, please message us on Twitter at SOP Soccer or email us, sonsofapitchsoccer@gmail.com, and we'll make sure that your company, your person, your brand is affiliated with Sons of a Pitch and gets all the credit they deserve on our website and on our social media platforms. So, with that being said, let's dive into all of the results. Gotta say hello to Red Bull Insider, to Anu Wiseman, and to Jason Jardim joining us here on the chat. It's great to have you all. And hopefully you all stay happy and as energized as I am right now, despite some of the results for your squads. So let's take a look. As things started off last Wednesday, August 31st, Philadelphia beats Atlanta 4-1. Philly's the first Eastern Conference team to clinch their playoff spot. At this point, Atlanta still is kind of in it, but as we'll see by the end of the weekend, I think Atlanta is out of the playoff picture. Philadelphia continues to score at historic rates. Also, they've not lost a home game all year. They've got 10 wins and 5 draws at home, which is really going to bode well for them when the playoffs come. One thing we got to mention about Atlanta, Andrew Gutman gets the goal for them. He's having pretty good offensive month or so for Atlanta. Definitely been a bright spot for them as of late, and he's definitely a player that they can kind of build around as they look to the future. Now we're going to move on. Columbus hosts Inter Miami, a game with huge playoff implications because you've got these two teams fighting for that 6-7 spot. And Columbus comes away with the 1-0 victory. Luis Diaz gets the goal. Possession was actually even, 50-50. However, what did they do with it, right? Columbus, 14 shots to Miami's 4. So Miami could not get a shot off, credit to Columbus's defense. And in a game that had minimal offense, the Crew take advantage. Then Montreal welcomes the Red Bulls of New York, and Lewis Morgan for Red Bull gets the game winner, his 13th of the season. Great little chip over the Montreal keeper. Speaking of Montreal keepers, I could not remember Montreal's goalkeeper last week's show. How could I forget James Pandemis, fellow Greek? My apologies to my countrymen on that one, of course. But James Pandemis did his best, came up with some good saves, but it was his offense let him down on this one as Red Bull gets the away win at Montreal 1-0. Red Bull only had 32.5% possession. 32.5% possession. But they were able to keep Montreal out of dangerous attacking areas, and they converted one of the few chances they had. And that's usually how it goes for the Red Bulls if they're not scoring 4 or 5 on some poor, hapless team. Next matchup, New England-Chicago 0-0 draw. New England just confuses me. They're goalless at home against Chicago with 63% possession. Then they go in their next match at home and win 3-0 against New York City. I don't understand the Revs. Now, they had a lot of opportunities against Chicago. Slonina had a few good saves. They hit the post a couple times. So maybe this just was, it wasn't breaking their way against Chicago tonight. But the Revs confused me, especially after last season, points record, struggling to make the playoffs this season. Confusing. It probably is all the players they lost. But why didn't their front office know this was happening and do something about it? Anyway, one name to throw out for the Revs, homegrown Noel Buck. He's gotten a handful of starts lately. He scores against NYC in their next match, so keep an eye on this kid. He could be good. Also, for those of you who want more Chicago Fire coverage, make sure you subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, because we have our own supporter and longtime friend of the show, John Donovan, who gives his Chicago Fire takes and recaps at halftime of our show. So make sure you're checking that out. And a big shout out and thank you to John Donovan, everyone over at Donovan Food Brokerage and Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Next matchup. This was the big one for us here. TFC 2, LA Galaxy 2. And if you haven't seen Mike on social media a lot lately, I think the TFC results might have had something to do with that. You've got Jimenez and Bernardeschi scoring for TFC. Bernardeschi draws the PK and then gets the goal. Douglas Costa and Ricky Push score for the Galaxy. If you would like to send condolences to Mike, you can do that care of SOP Soccer on Twitter and via email. I bet he'd appreciate hearing from everybody. Just a few comments though about TFC. First of all, goalkeeping's an issue, right? Bono had been so good. Bono, I could never say it, right? That's why I need Mike here. Bono had been good, right? But then he started to struggle. They bring in Westberg, who'd been good, and then he started to struggle. Then they bring in Bono, who's not been over the last several seasons, right? So their goalkeeping has been an issue. Next up, I found this stat very interesting. Michael Bradley leads the league in total passes attempted and short distance passes attempted. So they are running a lot of their game plan through Bradley. Either that or he's getting in some great defensive spots, forcing turnovers and distributing. Last interesting statistic about TFC, they have the most goals from outside the 18-yard box in the league with 10. There's a few teams that have 9 and 8. I think Columbus is in the mix because we've seen Cucho and Zelarayán with those distance strikes. But looking at Insigne and Bernardeschi, like those guys will strike it from 20, 25 yards out, and TFC has 10 goals from outside the box. Meanwhile, LA Galaxy, their entire season is pretty much resting on the feet of Ricky Push right now because their defense isn't going to help them out at all. So now let's take a quick look at some of the comments from everyone here. We have a new Wiseman, RBI, Neely W, Connor Knows Soccer, and Jay Jardim. Everyone chiming in on the chat. Statement win by my boys in Montreal, says RBI Insider. Absolutely, that's going to show up that confidence is going to show up come playoff time, especially if they get a second or third game matchup against Montreal. Jay says TFC just handing points away. And yeah, the defense is collapsing in the worst spot. He says Bono is so bad. And yeah, on those goals, on a few of them this week, he just looked like he was wrong-footed, leaning the wrong way, a little out of position, not really playing his game. And Jay also chimes in and says, because we don't have a number 9, we have to shoot from distance. Not getting those little tap-ins, not getting those good crosses in the box, I guess. I don't know. TFC doesn't strike me as a crossing team. With Pozuelo out of it, they don't seem like they're a very crossing first kind of team, that they want to play a little bit more direct, find their guys on the fringe of that box and blast it in. So good comments, everyone. Love to have you here. And a new Wiseman even says, fire Boca. Oh, man. Carlos Bocanegra from Atlanta. Like, that guy, I grew up watching him play. Love the man. But Atlanta's just not getting it done right now. Not getting it done right now. Anyway, let's get back to some of the results. We had another upset this weekend. New York City travels to D.C. and loses 2-1. DC not going down this season without a fight, trying to avoid the wooden spoon. NYCFC is in a bit of a tailspin. We're going to look at the standings at the beginning of the second half of our show, and we're going to see how many points New York City has been dropping. And if you guys don't know, MLSsoccer.com has a form guide, and it shows you across a row every result for each team, the score, location, and all of that, and you can see like how the form of these teams ebb and flow. And New York City's is not looking good right now. Houston with the upset of LAFC 2-1. I want to look at LAFC on this one because, okay, good for Houston, but we're going to talk about their troubles in a little bit after their next result. Who's worried about LAFC? Are you guys worried about LAFC? Are they going to not win the Shield? Are they going to flame out in the first game of the playoffs because they can't have a good run of form right now? Like, what are we thinking about LAFC? Or are they just trying new things? I think that's what it is. I think LAFC is trying to integrate some of their new signings, get all their stars like Chiellini and Bale up to match fitness, and this is just the result of it, right? Subpar performances. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on it too much. They've got too much talent for me to be worried about them. Maybe you as fans are. Let us know in the comment section of the video or on Twitter at SOP Soccer. Now we're going to go on to a Western Conference team who we were worried about a few weeks back, but no longer. Nashville rolls Colorado 4-1. Hani Mukhtar is your MVP favorite at this point. We'll talk about them in a bit. But meanwhile, the Rapids continue to show last season was a fluke. So many people were high on Colorado last season that, oh, look at what their coach is doing with less talent, but then they sell all their talent. So if you already are at a disadvantage and you sell your talent, you don't reload or restock or whatever you do. You don't change your tactics, and then you get called out this season. Colorado, let's take a quick peek at the standings just so I can put it into some context. Colorado is now sitting in 11th place in the Western Conference, 9 points off the playoff line, and just 4 points above bottom of the West, Houston, right? Colorado's not good this year. I didn't think they were that good last year. As a matter of fact, if those decision day results did not go in a specific order for them, they would have ended up being 4th or 5th in the Western Conference instead of number 1. And even that to me seemed like a fluke for the Rapids. They don't have the talent, and I think their coaching is overrated. And I'm trying to remember their coach's name. Is it Anthony Hudson? Or was he the former one? Robin Fraser. Excuse me. Robin Fraser. I just think he's an overrated coach. He might have his guys buying in, but if you're buying into tactics that don't work, that's not going to help you. Enough about my rant against Colorado. Let's look at another upset. Gosh, 3 upsets this weekend. Austin falls at home to the Portland Timbers. And there was some weird OptaJack stat out there where like Portland has never won a game in Texas before September until tonight. So if you're into odd statistics, go follow OptaJack on Twitter. But what was really, really telling of this game was that Austin had so many opportunities early and they just couldn't convert. So Gallese does get the one for them. But for Portland, Tui Loma and McGraw, their defenders are the two that get on the ball. So How are these defenders getting forward and creating opportunities? It's Eric Williamson. Eric Williamson, since he's come back healthy for Portland, you've seen Portland on an upward trend. The first one is a great little flick. It may have been off a set piece that Tuiloma was able to head in. And on the second one, Eric Williamson makes a great run down the sideline, cuts it in, shoots from a very tight angle. The goalkeeper for Austin is able to deflect it right into the on-rushing McGraw, who taps it in. So Eric Williamson's doing a lot of creative things to get these defenders involved in the game. And it's no surprise that this guy who was just starting to break into USMNT camp before his injury, when he comes back, Portland starts playing very, very well. Next match, Orlando 3, Seattle 2. This is Orlando's best offensive game in some time, and we're going to talk about Orlando in the second half, but I think we need to say Seattle is done. They will not make the postseason. And to wrap up the the midweek game, Salt Lake with a shocking win. How many upsets happened this weekend? Almost all of them in the Western Conference, right? Salt Lake 3-0 over Minnesota. And I want to point out a few statistics on this game. Let me take a look at some of the comments while this loads from MLSsoccer.com, right? Connor Knows Soccer says a busy week for New this week. With Champions League starting up, Europa League, he's looking to Europe. Connor, let's not get ahead of ourselves, man. Let's get through these MLS playoffs. Let's see. He also says, I thought Lorenzo was the TFC savior, though. And he looked like it. And they're going to get into some shootouts. That might help him out a bit. But here, let's take a look at these stats. I want to show you some of these statistics here, because he had 3 goals by RSL. And I don't believe that they are 3 goals better than Minnesota. So what is the breakdown here? Possession about even, 52-48 in favor of RSL. But the shots, Minnesota had not a shot on goal. That's the biggest thing. Minnesota had no offense going in this game. And if I do believe Emmanuel Reynoso, there's the headline, guys. Manuel Reynoso is injured. I don't believe he played in that game. So that is where their offense went. Now let's get back to our results. Let me go scroll up a little bit. I didn't have this displaying, so we will show a little of that there. Now we're getting into Saturday, September 3rd. Minnesota, ready to bounce back from that huge loss to RSL? No, they have another 3-0 loss. This time they're at home in Minnesota, and Dallas just brings the offense. Dallas gets their big game to get rejuvenated. And we talk about it on the picks and predictions. You can look at form, but you always have to wonder, when is your team's form going to change, or when is the other team's form going to pick up? And in this one, in these last 2 games for Minnesota, their form dipped. Their opponent's form is on the uptick. Big wins for RSL and Dallas. Not good for Minnesota, who lose back-to-back games for the first time since June. But silver linings here, Loons fans. When Minnesota had those back-to-back losses in June, right after that, they went on like a 5-game point streak with 4 wins or some ridiculous run of form. Maybe Minnesota and Adrian Heath can tap into what happened then and make it happen as they make a run into the playoffs. Now we got the Crew hosting Chicago Fire to a 0-0 draw. Second goalless draw for Chicago in 2 matches. And again, John Donovan's going to break this down a little bit more for you, but I'm shocked about the Fire having back-to-back goalless draws, because their defense has been the issue as of late. We have Wyatt Almsberg, who's been out with season-ending injury. Carlos Terán is still coming back into form after his injury. Chihos has been in and out of the lineup. You've got Bornstein and Pineda, and Jimenez, your defensive midfielder. He hasn't been consistent. There's been a lot going on with Chicago's defense, but you know what? In this game, it was Gaga Slonina. 9 saves. Go find the highlight reel of this one, everyone. Watch the 18-year-old keeper stonewall the Crew and salvage a point for his Fire team, who still thinks they got a shot at making the playoffs. They're going to have to go on a run here, but they still think they got a shot, and I'm not going to ruin it for them. Not yet, at least. Next few matchups. Philly beats the Red Bulls 2-0. Cincinnati defeats Charlotte 2-0. So these are kind of your top teams playing down a little bit, not to offend Red Bull, but when you're as hot as Philly is right now, they're playing down to everyone. New York just couldn't get that counterattack, couldn't get that final touch to find the back of the net, and 2-0 here. Another surprising result. Austin has a dip in form. They've now lost 2 straight, 3-0 in this one to Nashville. Nashville has now gone here. Let's listen to this. Austin, 2 losses and only 1 goal in those, but they're still second in the Western Conference. We'll call it a blip. We'll call it growing pains, right? Nashville, though, 4 straight wins, outscoring opponents 14-1 in that stretch. Hani Mukhtar, again, is now the Golden Boot leader and probably your MVP leader, no doubt about it. And I wonder if voters out there are going to try and split the newcomer of the year, Driussi MVP to Hani, and that'll give Hani a little bit more of the vote, right? And we got Hani Mukhtar edits hopping in the chat saying, "Come on, you boys in gold." Winning cures everything. We had heard a lot about Gary Smith being a bit on the hot seat, maybe losing the locker room, but winning, and I should say Dax McCarty's speeches cure everything, because after Dax gave that just burn it down kind of speech, we're terrible, we need to play better, this is awful, we need to just get back to what we're doing. Go find some of the quotes. They're fantastic. And he even says, we can't let Hani Mukhtar do it all by himself. Well, Mukhtar continues to do it. The rest of the team has stepped up too. And again, 14 goals in 4 games, only conceding 1. That is a full team buying in and playing well. That's not winning games 4-3, 5-4, and the defense slacking off, or winning games 1-0 and the defense and the goalkeeper are coming up big. Nashville is playing excellent soccer, and there it is. MVP. He says it's because we got Schaffelberg. Yeah, Schaffelberg's been playing well, surprisingly, I think. Anyway, he's definitely fitting in. Shaq Moore's fitting in. Hani and crew doing what they do. Next match up, now we're looking at Sunday matches. Portland with their 3rd straight 2-1 victory, this time over Atlanta. Despite the solid performance, Atlanta, I think, is out of the playoffs with this one. Portland, though, still's got work to do. They are currently in and above the playoff line, but their next 3 matches are against Minnesota, at Columbus, and against LAFC. LAFC is too good to lose this many in a row, are they? And is Minnesota also this good to lose 3 in a row? Portland has some tough matchups, but it's time, I think, for that late season bunker and counter Portland tactics that everyone is used to. Next match up, we have DC United versus the Colorado Rapids. And this one ends in a 0-0 draw. And I really don't want to talk about either one of these terrible teams. So we're going to move on, because I know everyone here wants to hear our takes about Toronto falling at home 4-3 to Montreal, to their Canadian rivals. Montreal has said this week that they were feeling disrespected, and maybe a little bit of that is from us here on SOP Soccer, not just because Mike is a TFC till he dies kind of fan, but I've also said Montreal does not look like a team that is playing for trophies. Yeah, they're second in the Eastern Conference, but when they get mediocre results against mediocre teams, okay, maybe winning is all that matters, right? 3 points is all that matters at the end of the day, but they just don't look like that championship team. Well, you're going to beat your rival 4-3 away. Maybe they're starting to change my mind a little bit. Maybe Ismail Koni's development is going to change my mind a little bit. Maybe Pandemi's playing much better in goal than this game. This 3 goals in would change my mind, but one step at a time here. One step at a time. Now, speaking of TFC and Montreal's kind of flipped the script over the last few seasons. They have 4 wins and 1 draw in their last 5 games against Toronto. So let's let that sink in a little bit. Now let's take a couple of quick comments here before we round out that. Don't know why people thought TFC were cruising at 2-0. Our defense is so shaky against quality teams. And that's great insight from Jay Jardine. Toronto, it looks like they can play against some of the bottom teams in the league, but when you go against solid and competent offenses, these are the kind of results you're going to get. So to round out the weekend, the Revs get a 3-0 victory over New York City. And as we mentioned, their homegrown Noel Buck, and that's, I think, the second one in that game. So keep an eye on their new homegrown. I think Bruce Arena is going to have to start playing some young players because their vets hadn't been doing it. Seattle gets a big win over Houston. I still think there's too many teams for Seattle to leap to get into the playoffs, but this was a very nice win. But the big news after this game was that Houston fires first-year coach Paulo Nagamura, along with assistants Jimmy Nielsen and Chris Martinez. So Nagamura came in with a lot of hype, and at the beginning of the season, Houston was playing pretty well. I think they were top 5 for maybe a month or 6 to 8 weeks at the beginning of the season. But he ends up going 8 wins, 16 losses, and 5 draws. Now, part of this, I can't remember if Nagamura was hired by current GM and current ownership and management administration, or if he was hired and then they replaced it. So he always was kind of on the hot seat. But really, it's all about results, right? Like, he is not getting results. They're signing new players. They're moving away from how Tab Ramos wanted to construct a roster and kind of how he wanted to play. And Nagamura was not getting the best out of his players. So that is why he is gone. And we've said it on this show, despite the signing of Hector Pereyra, the Mexican international, he had been just covering for everybody. He hadn't been able to elevate Houston. He just had to put out fires. So Nagamura gets his walking papers from Houston, and he's actually the 4th coach to be fired this season. So teams are not messing around anymore. To round out the weekend, San Jose beats Vancouver 2-0. It's funny, I originally picked Vancouver, but with Cavallini, his recent problems on the pitch, we'll say, I ended up flipping my pick to San Jose, and glad I did there. And now LAFC gets back on track. Who was worried? I wasn't worried. Were you worried? We weren't worried. LAFC gets back on track with a 2-0 victory against Real Salt Lake. So with that, guys, we are going to take a quick break here on the YouTube side of things. You'll see a word from our sponsor. On the podcast, you're going to hear from our good friend and supporter, John Donovan, about the Chicago Fire's recent run of form and his take on their results. And we'll be back in just a minute to look at the conference standings and profile our team of the week, Orlando City SC. We'll be back in just a second. All right, soccer fans, we are back from our halftime break here at Sons of a Pitch Soccer Central, doing our MLS weekly recap. And I want to, again, thanks to John Donovan and Skira Icelandic Spring Water. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you keeping us up to date on all things Chicago Fire. And for all of our viewers and listeners out there, get over to your local 7-Eleven, grab a bottle of Skira Icelandic Spring Water. It's pH balanced to help quench your thirst and to rehydrate whatever your hydration needs are. Wow, that was kind of a terrible thing. Let me say it again. It's pH balanced to help hydrate you best. Anyway, let's roll on into the second half of the show. And as I mentioned, we are going to take a look at the conference standings because this week was all about playoff positioning, right? So starting with the Eastern Conference, we still have Philly and Montreal up top. Red Bull and New York City are in 3rd and 4th, but the gap between that 5th place team, Orlando City, is shrinking. And neither New York team should be confident of hosting a playoff game at this point in time. They need to go on and get some results. Orlando City, Columbus, and New England round out the playoff spots right now, but we're going to find out in a minute. Orlando shouldn't be comfortable there either. Now, just below the playoff line in the Eastern Conference, we have Cincinnati and Miami at 38 and 36 points. Right now, New England has the tiebreaker over Cincinnati. First tiebreaker for MLS playoff seeding is number of wins, and then it gets into goal differential. So a little different than some other leagues. But at this point, they both have 9 wins. And if we look at the goal differential, we're going to see that New England is a 0 goal differential and Cincinnati has -1. So very tight. Goals are going to be at a premium for these teams coming down the stretch. What's interesting is Chicago's down here in 13th place with 32 points, but they've still got games against Charlotte, Toronto, and New England left. If they win out, Chicago could make a huge jump. Not saying it's going to happen, but that's just how crazy the Eastern Conference is right now. If we go down to the Western Conference, again, LAFC is on top with 60 points, but oh, wait, that supporter shield ain't locked up anymore. Philadelphia also has 60 points. Austin is at 51. Dallas and Nashville at 46 and 45 points round out the top four in the West. Now, the last three spots in the playoffs in the Western Conference have been juggled around every week for the last several. Minnesota right now on 44 points is in fifth, but then Seattle in ninth is on 36 points. I don't think Seattle is going to get in. If they do, it will be in that 7th spot. They're going to need a lot of help from Portland and LA to kind of fall out of favor, or Salt Lake to fall out of favor and have a poor run of form. And then they're going to have to win 4 or 5 games left to get in. But here we sit right now, bottom 3 playoff spots in the Western Conference: Minnesota, Salt Lake, and Portland, with the Galaxy just looking behind Portland and Seattle trying to hold on for nothing short of a miracle here. But now, with that being said, let's go take a look at the 5th place team in the Eastern Conference, which has been a surprise to me all season. We're going to take a look at Orlando City, and here is their home page, and they are looking for their 4th straight victory, and they got it over Seattle. So 4 straight wins despite not having much offense. And let's take a look then about how they're doing it, right? So Orlando City, are they doing it with offense? They got 4 straight wins. They got to be scoring goals, right? No, they've been winning games 1-0, 2-1. This game against Seattle 3-2 is probably their biggest offensive output in several weeks, if not months. By the eye test, they've been woeful. They've been blown out in a handful of games. So they're not scoring and keeping up with other teams in those kind of matches. So let's take a look at their scoring. And with scoring, we got to start with designated players, right? Because teams sign offense. You raise defense, you sign offense, right? You got Ersin Kara, 9 goals, 2 assists. Not terrible, but he's your top goal scorer. You've got Facundo Torres, 6 goals, 7 assists, and Mauricio Pereyra, 1 goal, 6 assists. So your DPs have combined for 16 goals and 15 assists. So they've pretty much been playing to each other, if you think of it in that sense. Now, Pereyra, I don't expect him to be scoring a lot of goals. He is the maestro in the middle, so to say. He's the assist man. He makes them go. But if he is that, only 6 assists is not a good season for him. Then you want to look at international signing Alexander Pato, who's supposed to have a resurgent season this year, and at times looked brilliant, but injuries and just poor form has sidelined him as well. He's only got 3 goals and 5 assists on the season. So those are your top goal scorers. Also adding in Junior Urso with 4 goals. No one else on that team has more than 2. So the offense is anemic. So we know Orlando is not in 5th place because of offense. Let's take a little look at some more numbers. They've got 12 wins, 10 losses, and 6 draws. They're practically playing 500 soccer here. They have 35 goals for, 40 goals against, a -5 goal differential. They're the only Eastern Conference team with a negative goal differential in the playoffs, and even within shouting range of the playoffs, right? But their expected goals is about 34. Their expected goals allowed is 36. So they're about where the models are predicting them, yet how can they still be in this playoff spot? They're one of the lowest scoring teams, and no team around them, when you look at offensive numbers and goals scored, no team around them in the league is in the playoffs. So we know it's not offense. All right, let's flip it over and look at a couple comments here before we get into the defense. So we've got a lot of comments still going back to TFC and Nashville. We're talking Orlando. Let's stick with Orlando. Is their defense what's keeping them in the playoff hunt? They are in the top half of the league when it comes to opponents' expected goals, but spoiler alert, it's not their defense that's keeping them in. Pedro Gallese, their goalkeeper, has a 64.4 save percentage and is 0 for 3 on PKs. Now, in shootouts, he does pretty well, but as far as PKs during the run of the game, 0 for 3. And if you look at the statistics about goalkeepers in MLS this season from FBref.com, He's about a middle tier keeper by the numbers. Also, Orlando's not a pressing team. They're not turning it over and creating chances and then just having, low percentage chances, or they're scoring because of volume. They're not a pressing team, right? Gioacchini is a defensive stalwart for them. He's got great numbers compared to other defenders in the league, but their other two starting defenders, Robin Janssen and Ruan, they're near the bottom of the league when it comes to pressures, tackles, interceptions, and clearances. Again, according to FBref.com. So those guys actually have above average offensive numbers for defenders. So Orlando wants their defenders playing forward. And maybe that's why they've gotten blown out in a handful of games, because they're caught out of position in transition defense, right? They're not getting back. So we know then it's not their offense. It's not their defense. The tactics are kind of what they are. So you know what's keeping Orlando City in the 5th spot? It's their schedule. It is their schedule. It blew my mind when I looked at this. So they have 2 losses to Cincinnati, 2 losses to DC, 1 loss to New England. So 3 of those are bad losses, right? I'll give you the Cincinnati ones. But the other 5 losses are to non-conference teams or teams above them, right? So they're losing points to non-conference teams, and they're losing points to teams who are already much better than them and above them. Now, since he's been hot and cold this season, so depending on when they caught him, could have been a good time. So when I say they've lost games to teams above them, I mean right now in the standings. Also against the Western Conference, they're 2 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses. So just under 500 against Western Conference teams. But here's the thing. They got 6 points against Charlotte, 4 points against Chicago, and I think they've gotten a result, at least a point, against every other team in the Eastern Conference. So they're doing it on a very weak schedule, and they're treading water against Western Conference teams and good teams here. So that's why we got to look at the last 6 games for them, because this is going to make or break Orlando City's season. They're at Philly, home against Atlanta, home against Toronto, at New York, at Inter Miami, and then against Columbus. All 6 of those teams are fighting not only for points records and shields like Philadelphia, are fighting for playoff spots, and in New York City's case, for seeding. They want to stay top 4. These are not going to be easy games for Orlando, and I could see Orlando coming off their U.S. Open Cup game. If they win that one, I could see them having a bit of a hangover. Hey, we won it. We won a trophy. And then they drop maybe like 5 of their last 6 games to flame out and maybe fall out of the playoffs. So Orlando City is 5th in the East, in my opinion, because they have had a very favorable schedule to this point, and their 5th place spot is very, very temporary. Now, real quick, they are in the U.S. Open Cup Finals. I am not going to knock them for any of that. It's this upcoming Wednesday night, September 7th, and they will be playing the Sacramento Republic of USL Championship. So, how did Orlando get there? They beat Miami in PKs. They beat Nashville in PKs. Then they romped over Red Bull New York 5-1. So they've got some U.S. Open Cup momentum, as well as some momentum coming in from 4 straight wins in the regular season. But Sacramento's got a little of that USL magic, so we'll see how the game is. It should be great either way. Now let's take a quick roundup from the chat. No questions tonight. And because of that, boys and girls, we're going to give you an early episode. It has been just about 45 minutes here. I want to thank everyone who jumped in the chat. I want to thank Jason Jardim, Hani Mukhtar Edits, Anu Wiseman, Connor Knows Soccer, Red Bull Insider, Neely W, everyone for jumping in, for listening on the podcast. Thanks again to Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. From Mike, from me, Nick, on behalf of the Sons of a Pitch Soccer Central, thanks for tuning in. If you want to get more involved with our show, reach out to us on Twitter at SOP Soccer. reach out to us via email, sonsofaPitchSoccer@gmail.com. We're more than happy to have a conversation with you. We're more than happy to discuss sponsorships, donations, which we put right back into the show. We don't pocket any of this money. We go back and invest it into hosting fees for StreamYard, website hosting fees, graphic packages, software, equipment, video, mic, all that sort of thing. So we put it right back into the show, and we want to continue to fulfill our mission, which is to grow the sport of soccer here in America through conversation. So thank you all for being part of our conversation. And with that, we will say good night until the next round of matches. Hey, soccer fans, this is Nick once again for SOP Soccer Central, giving you my little post credits tidbit, extra bit of soccer news and discussion here. I've been using this to share a little bit of my soccer memorabilia, and as we're getting ready for the World Cup, I wanted to pull out and show you my 2010 World Cup jersey, the white one. Love the white; it's so clean. A little bit of that sash pattern here going across. 2010, my memories of the 2010 World Cup. Obviously, that Donovan goal against Algeria to send us through is huge. But it was right after I graduated law school, was studying for the bar exam, and the only place near Valparaiso that was up early showing the games was the Tilted Kill pub in Maryville. So it was pretty much like 5 of my good law school friends who wanted to watch soccer, the manager, and like the underage waitress just serving us buffet breakfast and beers at like 8 in the morning, 7 in the morning, whatever time we were getting there for the game. So 2010 World Cup memories. Shout out to Brian and JJ and everyone else who joined us for those World Cup games, man. It was a blast. Anyway, fans, thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next week.